get started, I wanted to just take a minute to recognize Michael Kelker. His picture is out there on the poster. Michael Kelker is the founder of Democracy Days. He founded it in 2001. He imagined it, and someone said up here, examining the history, health, and functioning of democracy in America and abroad. It's been happening every single year since 2001. Last year was the first year that he was not actively involved in planning and hosting and making it happen. He did attend last year, and last year he passed away. So we are continuing this tradition where we talk about topics that are important to democracy. And today we're talking about music and art and community radio, public radio, because that is an important part of democracy. And we have with us two folks. We have Ace Rowe, who is a podcast host, former volunteer radio DJ, and a local connector between artists. Ace DJs around town while continuing to connect with listeners of Sonic Space, which aired on KDHX for 5 years on Monday mornings. Ace graduated from Florida State in 2015 before moving to St. Louis and is the origin for their work in public radio. Ace has a BS degree in international affairs with a focus in political science and a BA degree in marketing due to their longtime study of foreign cultures and religions and the intersection between the modern systems we're faced with globally. Ace just launched the High Context podcast with Darian Whitfall, in which we dive into deep about the intersection of high context cultures such as music and arts industry exist within low context systems like Western social, political hierarchies and contractual regulations through long form conversation with folks that inspire our community. Shortly before his passing, Michael Kelker and Ace were meeting regularly to join forces to better envision and execute an anti-racist future in each aspect of our life. Ace is extremely honored and grateful to be a part of Democracy Days for the first time. And then we have Ital K, a 42-year reggae radio broadcasting professional, 20 years in Miami, 20 years on EnglishPoundRadio.com, which you can find at www.EnglishPoundRadio.com. And 15 years hosting ITAL Rhythms on KDHX. Many of those volunteer years overlapped and were performed at night. And then ITAL is one of 3 co-chairs from the League of Volunteer Enthusiasts, aka the L.O.V.E. of KDHX. It's a grassroots community-based organization and is here to discuss art and democracy in music and the voices of the bi-state community. ITAL is a returning participant of Democracy Days, first invited by the late Professor Michael Kelker, we think in 2012, and that is a name you should all be familiar with. Michael Kelker, who founded Democracy Days, who is an emeritus English professor there, was a KDHX radio host, was involved with L.O.V.E, Holocaust scholar. He wrote a book about the history of reggae. So I'm Lindsay, I'm an English faculty member, and I'll be moderating this conversation today. So the first thing I wanted to ask you both, just in case there are people out there that don't quite know, what is KDHX? You guys could explain what that is.
Sure. ITAL has more experience with it, but in general, like I mentioned, I'm a transplant here to St. Louis, and so when I heard about KDHX being a community radio, I was so excited. I had really never heard of there being such a thing in the United States outside of college radio from my experience. So I would say KDHX is quite a unique opportunity for community engagement through media and something outside of the typical music industry when it comes to a platform for which artists that don't have a record label or don't have the funds to really get a commercial release in the way of getting on sync or getting on certain programming such as like in the malls or in the stores or on the commercial radio. So you know more about where it all came from specifically with KDHX though.
Specifically, a little bit more was greetings to all of you. Welcome to this edition here of Democracy Days. As Lindsay mentioned, yes, this is my return performance here, Michael. I think it was in 2012 I came here and did something similar So I've been in your shoes, being a student. It's a wonderful thing. You're on the cusp of creativity, where nobody can stop you or prevent that creativity. And that creativity can turn into anything that you want. It's up to you to manifest. And that's one of the greatest things with being in school, being in college. A great place like St. Charles Community College. I started in college. I went right to school, I went to 4 years in college at Civic, LIU, up in Long Island, New York. Never knew a thing about broadcasting or community radio. So from a grassroots level, this is where it starts. Community, college, community, radio. Community brings people together. All races, all sizes, different shades, many languages, various identities. But we all have creativity. And creativity allowed me, along 40 years, throughout my journey, to land in KDHX, an organisation, a radio station I knew nothing about, but my wife, who I was dating at the time, knew the dots about reggae music, internationally known, says, where can I get involved with the community? And she pointed me right to KDHX. I went to KDHX, I auditioned, just like anybody else. I wanted to volunteer and offer my services. They gladly welcomed me with open arms. And I felt at home from day one. And my enthusiasm started there. Michael Kelton was the second person I met. Didn't know the bloke from Adam, but he sought me out. He knew about me. I didn't know a thing about him, but he sought me out. So from day one, my journey at KDHX, learning about this community, so I'm not from here. So I learn about the community. I learn about the people that make up our community. And together with that, I've learned to grow with the community and helping the community step forward and vision their dreams. Because your dream is not just one colour or one vision. It's a united dream. And this feels good. This is democracy. This is America.
Thank you. Can you elaborate a little bit about why L.O.V.E got started and what happened at KDHX? Because everything you're saying, it sounds wonderful. Something happened. Can you talk a little bit about that and why the need for L.O.V.E came about?
Yeah, something tragically happened. As I said, 15 years. Ace, many years. But there are other volunteers just like us who were invested in the community, in KDHX, in volunteering for much longer, even twice my tenureship. And I put in 15. There were people that have been volunteering for 30, 35 years, 38 years.
Former staff members as well.
And then one tragic day, management has been under a scheme of lying to the community and misleading us, the volunteers. Simply put, being untruthful in actions, words, and deeds. Does anybody know the name Tom Paparay? Raise your hand if you do. One gentleman. Tom Paparay is a very, very important cultural name here in St. Louis. If you don't know Tom Paparay, he owns a store, Vintage Vinyl, in the L.O.V.E. Everyone know Vintage Vinyl? He's the owner. Stop in sometime. Let him know, hey, I'm from St. Charles, I'm representing, but I'm here just to say hello. He'll like that. But he was important in the founding of KDHX. He got it started. And he, along with many other individuals, put together, it was just a tower in the middle of a field where the transmitters were supposed to go up, and they used to broadcast from there. I believe a little like mini caravan, a little cutout used to go in there, and they built up a board and a tower, transmitter, everything, turntables hooked up, boom. Bluegrass music. Anyone here familiar with bluegrass music? Yeah? Tom, Willa, and Willa Jewell. They have bluegrass. They've been volunteering for 38 years, all of a sudden, February 2022. The executive director of KDHX, Kevin Wells, Gary Pearson, all of a sudden decided that they want to eliminate certain voices and ages, people who are older, 60 years old and above, people with grey hairs like me. They wanted to change the face and change the sound of KDHX. And if in the time, KDHX is known, one of its logos is independent music plays here. And that also means that independent voices play here. Voices that you're all familiar with. Many of you grew up with programs on Saturday morning. Paul Stark. Does anybody remember that name? Paul Stark? Had a beautiful program for over 30 years. Many families grew up with him on a Saturday morning. And all of a sudden, one day, they got rid of Tom Paparay because he voiced his opinion. All he asked was a question. One of the founding members, John McHenry, had recently passed. And he just asked the executive director, Kelly Wells, just to mention that the man had passed. Long-time volunteer, Kelly Wells refused. No word, no mention, no nothing. She refused. Remember what I said about this moment. Tom Paparay was upset that she refused. And because he objected, he became targeted. And they used many excuses to terminate him unjustly. And that's how it all started. So from Tom, two other long-standing representatives, Drea Stein, Andy Coco, long-time volunteers, anchors of this community. They were targeted, they were fired.
They were stewards of the station, like in the community and through the industry as well. And so from my perspective, not having been there from the earlier days, what I had seen was in our strategic planning in 2020, I had seen leadership say that we want to have a more anti-racist, equitable station and practices. And then when folks were expressing their dissent, we were then isolated, as well as it felt as though being heard wasn't the matter, it was whether we agreed with personalities that led the station or not. And because we wanted to be included in how the station shifted its scope and how it did so in an equitable way, that wasn't up for discussion, apparently. And so those who wanted to talk about what's possible at the station were not, there was no table to sit at with leadership, with management. And we wanted to not be isolated, even though that's what management wanted. So when we started getting together, that's when more people started getting targeted, such that Tom Ray was targeted, such that Andy and Drea were targeted as well. And so, yes, there was excuses for Tom Ray dismissal, for Andy and Drea's dismissal, and then there was a huge kind of blanket excuse for 10 more DJs, including Michael Calker, to be dismissed from the station. And those claims were just not true. Michael Calker, that you would know, is the most anti-racist person I've probably ever met, who is in the male the body that he's in, we have our own unconscious bias, of course, but he's one I saw, we were talking earlier, who has dynamic logic. And I don't think that's something that everyone sees every day is dynamic logic. It's very important, I believe, to have for a progressive future. So we're working with leadership that doesn't have a dynamic logic mentality regarding leadership. When I think about how a captain steers the boat, we all kind of have to be on board about what direction this boat is going for it to get there. And then to see a captain of a ship get in the way of the boat getting to the destination, you think at some point high tides float all boats, right? And that like the moving even 10% more in the right direction is better than saying, of course, that's not working and that's not equitable for a community. So I think Ital and I have a very special little Venn diagram circumstance where we were both asked to mediate with leadership when our 10 colleagues were dismissed. And we understood this as another isolation tactic of being told one thing by leadership without our brothers and sisters next to us to hold that leadership accountable. And it's actually something I've seen exhibited more times than I would wish to count, not just within KDHX either. And so I remember listening to Itel's set the next day, right after those 10 were dismissed, and we were asked to mediate. And there's a very, very special song, very special demo version of a song that Itel was able to play as the last song of Ital Rhythms being Hey KDHX, made by local musicians. And if you listen to the song, it does cite Andy Andrea, and that's because it was in demo mode the week of this happening. So I encourage you to take a listen because local artists are important for a community for kind of holding up a mirror to what's going on or painting a picture when you didn't know those colors even existed. So I myself left in December. My last show was like the last Monday of November last year. Mediation, I had like one meeting of mediation with the staff, and I was told that I was not a good representative of the station and not a good ambassador for the station in their eyes. And so it felt right for me to go on sabbatical until things are in a different environment for the station, because if I'm not the right ambassador for the station, if I'm not representing their values, then it means I'm not in the place I'm meant to be. I'm not in the ambassador role that I'm meant to be in. And my last song was a song that Michael Calker told me about. It's a cover by the Playadors of the song Midnight Rider. It was really sad. I don't think either one of us wanted to leave. But I think at the end of the day, at least for myself, no molecule in my body wanted to be in that building with the environment that they had created. And I think it's always important when you feel isolated to band together harder, and with the right intention, with making sure we're all on the same page, right?
Absolutely. Being on the same page, sharing the same vision. Just like Ace mentioned, what actually occurred also with 10 individuals that was targeted. I was slated to do my show unaware of the events of what had happened. And then I heard another colleague of mine, Art Dwyer, had a very popular jazz program. And I heard the end of his program, and he said that he had enough and had quit KDHX. And I was just completely astounded. Completely astounded. The man who's invested 35 years just going to sign off just like that because he's upset as to what was happening. So I went in, prepared to do my show at 11 o'clock at night, to do a normal reggae show. But the whole vibe just completely changed. As soon as I walked through the door, the vibes just changed. And whatever I had planned for the audience, for the community to listen to, that all changed. And the whole show after that, when I got on the air, I'm radical, I'm unashamed, and I stand up for what's right. And I don't care who it is, I'll stand up for what's right. What they did to my colleagues by terminating them, lying to them falsely, changing the bylaws, which was critical for them to do what they were doing, they physically went ahead and changed the bylaws without any approval or notification to any of the volunteers, which is a violation of the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, a violation of their laws, federal laws.
I think there's also, so speaking of the laws would be like we exist in a contractual environment in our world, right? Like that on a low contextual level, there is laws violated. But beyond that, like this music industry that we find ourselves, arts industry that we find ourselves in, is highly contextual. When you think about an artist creating a piece of music or an artist creating a piece of visual art, there's also people taking in that art and having their own interpretation to it. So it could be their own interpretation, how they show up to that art that day, but also how all of the environments of how that piece got made matter. So all of the history and all of the people and all of their energy that they put into the station was not considered in this decision. Even, on a low contextual level and a high contextual level, there was multiple violations, not just, we live in a contractual world, of course, and it protects us at times, but we are humans. And community is a part of our existence, and connection between humans is a part of our success as a species. And for that to go ignored on an arts level, but also in our political world day to day, or on all levels, not just on a hierarchical level, but in so many aspects of our life too, that of all the places, community radio should be the safe place to have that playground together, right? So where does love come into all of this?
Love comes into it when, after I resigned my show, doing Ice Algorithms, I vocally did do something rebellious. I rebelled on them against the management of KDHX with my last program. I let them have it. And I did not mince my words. Unheard of in broadcasting today.
I think the listeners really needed to know as well. I think you were taking the sheep's wool off of everything.
That's what I was told, because the community had no idea what was going on. And in 2 hours, actually the heart of the matter was really an hour. In 1 hour, I uncovered and revealed a lot of things that was happening. In one day, over 230 volunteer years was terminated. In one day. Think about that. 230 years of St. Louis cultural volunteer history.
And expertise.
Expertise.
What corporation would eliminate that overnight? When you think about a corporation that has that equity of knowledge, it just sounds like shooting in the foot a little bit, right? Like you're just missing out on sharing that knowledge onto the next generation.
And they killed 230 hours in one night, one move. I objected, and I was on air. After I resigned, the other colleagues that were in agreement, some resigned also in solidarity. Michael was targeted, and that was another reason why I let them have it. They targeted Michael as being racist. She's already said it. Michael has been to Jamaica more times than Kelly Wells has been in her dreams. He's been there personally. He's met with the people of the community. Rastafarianism, my faith, he was always intrigued by that. Not just talking about it, he physically went himself. Professor Kelber went down to Jamaica, caught a plane, rents a cabin up in Montego Bay and enjoying some jackfruit and steamed fish and rice and peas and curry goat and fried chicken Jamaican style. He's in heaven. That's his most favourite country in the world. Tell him to go to Jamaica, he's ready. When we're together, we talk Jamaica anytime. What you want, chat about Virgin? Yeah, man, everything iron. He was one of those that was targeted. So, Michael was one of the founding members of the L.O.V.E organization. We all got together inside the Dre Stein's home. There's a couple of other people. And we decided, what are we going to do? Something's got to be done. It's not right what they've done to us. We shall not remain silent. We're going to stand up for what's right. The community, they were in uproar. Long-time listeners, totally infuriated. Musicians, creators of music in the community, ignored. The management turned their backs completely on the community and the artistry of our area. They wanted to have something done about it. What could they do? They were looking to us. So we came together to think about what can we do to make things right. And that's how L.O.V.E started. We decided to meet weekly on a Tuesday. From 6 members, it grew to 10, to 20, to 35, 40 and beyond. We meet weekly to discuss everything that's happening between us. We discuss, we share ideas. We are what KDHX is not. They talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. They undiversify, they exclude, and that you are definitely not welcome. Especially if you've got a brain, and an idea, and an opinion, and the right to express that opinion, and feel valued.
Thank you. I have a question that is kind of broad, but it's kind of like to bring us back to why we're here, which is democracy. And that is, can you guys talk about how art, whether it's music or something else, how that connects to strong democracy in your opinion?
There's something you were saying in there, and the lyrics "Get Up, Stand Up" came on my head from Bob Marley, and I think like that's one of those artists that is of course iconic, but for all the right reasons of how revolutionary music can be. Oftentimes, yes, you can write maybe a song by yourself and get the demo out there, but it takes bringing people together to make music. When we create, we are, that's transforming our reality when we create. And the most beautiful thing is when folks come together to create and then interpret and discuss and decide that the future doesn't have to be what it was, what the past has been, but can be something completely new and dynamic. I think that, in so many ways, music and art do bring us together in ways that some would say are dangerous.
I would say that it's a connection, because music and art, it brings people together. You're the artist, you're creative. You have an idea, you have a song, you have a rhythm, and you want the world to hear. You want St. Louis to hear your rhythm. But you don't know who is going to take the time to even play your rhythm so that somebody else could hear your rhythm. So, my connection to the community where art and music come together is where that artist who has that dream, he listens to my program on KDHX. just like many others did for all these years. Sends an email, I've got a song here, I want you to listen to this. Tell me what you think. I don't know the guy, but he's a listener. And I'm connected to the community. Don't know him. Send him an email back. Thank you for sending me the email. I'm going to listen to your song, and I'm going to give you a response back in 2 days. I listened to the song, and I gave him the feedback. I said, listen, I can play this. It needs a little bit of work, but you've got the ambition. I can play it. And I'm not ashamed to play it so that everybody else can hear it. And I did play it. I said, it's not a finished product, but it's a start. And from that connection has been made, and that's what KDHX was all about. That artist knew that he has a connection out of the blue. He wasn't expecting anything, but he made a connection to KDHX. And KDHX was good enough to play his song so that everybody else could hear.
There wasn't gatekeeping when it comes to interactions like that. Like, there's no office manager to send it to and then they get it to iTal. I mean, this happens in some cases when you're talking physical media. But I think when it comes to the revolutionary act of sharing art, is that the more that art, when art is gatekept less, everyone is better for it. And I just mean everyone. I don't think there's even any way to say that people are worse off when art is less gatekept. So I think in terms of the St. Louis community and like the St. Louis arts community, yeah, the opportunity to access for learning opportunities, for sharing opportunities, for listening opportunities, if we can tear those like barriers down and provide access in all those radical ways, we just have an even more involved world around us in that way. And I know when St. Louis has that tight-knit web all secure and in tight, and I just know that revolutionary sort of mindset of like peaceful revolution from within with creation is possible for the entire Western world, not just Missouri, not just the United States, but the entire Western world will absolutely ripple out from here. So I encourage you, if you haven't been to live music, if you haven't, emailed that email, for that favorite artist that you have, or even shared a piece of art with someone who maybe hasn't seen it before and just talk to them about how it made you feel, I think that's also like a very important way of representing yourself and kind of talking about maybe things that aren't easy to talk about with someone that you want to have that in-depth conversation with. And I'd be interested to see what you walk away with, maybe a new worldview or a new mindset and a way to relate to someone else and a way to represent yourself.
On top of that, I would say that music and creativity here in St. Louis, if you're a musician, it gives you the opportunity, if you're dreaming, you believe in yourself, you should no longer be thinking of just St. Louis. It's great to think about St. Louis, St. Charles, this area. But for you, you have to think global. We're all living in a global world, and you want your message to get out there globally. Along with the description I was described before, in turn, because I'm known globally, I introduce these artists here in St. Louis to my global audience. So it's a cyclical street. One hand washes another. People here in St. Louis get discovered elsewhere. And people who I know, I tell them about certain artists from certain genres so that they can learn about them. Music is a lesson. It teaches you. But music and art, it has a message. And that's the thing to understand. Music and art, they have a message. Especially with reggae music. Reggae music is a revolutionary music because it talks about history, culture, standing up for truths and rights, and being united.
I think reggae, when I think about reggae, I also think about this notion I learned in international affairs courses in college. And raise your hand if anyone has heard this phrase before: think global, act local. Has anyone heard this before? Nice, awesome. It's it's, as we think about what the world needs, like acting on that thought in our community as well. I think that's really beautiful.
I have a question for you first, please. Can you talk a little about this high context podcast you launched and just like what kind of conversations take place with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew when I was stepping away from KDHX I needed to pour my time into something new. I've already spoken a little bit about the dynamics between high context and low context, but this podcast actually came from running into Darian Wigfall at a local lounge, and I told him about what was going on with our deterioration of our favorite community radio station, which he previously had a show on called The Bridge, where he would connect new hip music and the samples that they used, samples being licks and riffs from music that's already been recorded, and turning it into something new, almost transmuting that energy into something that everyone's taking on now, and he had a very interesting experience at KDHX as well, stepping away from the station in 2019 due to racist policies and actions taken by the station, and not something that he could see himself being a part of either. So as I updated him last year, we started having some really important discussions about what's possible for the future of the station, or and just making, in those conversations we found that we had a lot in common, that we had a lot of ethos in common. And in the first episode of the High Context podcast, we talk more about Darian's journey. That first episode is me interviewing him, second one's him interviewing me, and these conversations are about how folks who live in a highly contextual way exist within a low context framework, and how we can have even further highly contextual lives. So one of the questions that we ask is, what is a practice that you found that has helped you live in a highly contextual way? How do you connect with those around you, whether it's other humans or other life forms, or the nature itself, and how we interact with our day-to-day systems in place in a way that allows, a goal of High Context Podcast would turn STEM into STEAM. Has anyone heard STEAM as an acronym as opposed to STEM? But yeah, adding the arts into something as important as science, technology, and economics and maths, engineering, the E is always something for me, but arts, adding arts into that just as vital and as funded as all those other categories. So yeah, it's a long-form podcast. We've got long-form episodes coming out bi-weekly every fortnight. And then in between those, we'll have some shorter kind of the moment episodes. And we're interviewing, taking deep dives into people in our community who inspire us, who inspire our community, and that we've seen live in a highly contextual way. And I'm excited for the deep dives to come, because we've only recorded 9 episodes, so there's definitely more to come.
Thank you. And I have a question for you, Ital. So my original question was, who owns public radio? And it seems to be that the community does. You think that should be it. I guess my question is, who actually owns public radio, and what can we as the community do about it?
The Double Helix Corporation, they're the ones that own KDHX. And they're operating every day by its charter, by its bylaws. Part of its bylaws is a 501c3 non-profit organization. They rely on funding from the community, as well as non-profit organizations locally, nationally, to get funding in order to stay on the air. They rely on a lot of grants in order to, grants and community support and donations. That's what is the heart of any community broadcast media. the relationship to the community. In order for KDHX to exist for over 37 years, they've operated by bylaws. Those bylaws were inadvertently changed without anyone's approval from the years probably 2008 before I got there. And things have gone downhill from there. KDHX, as part of its charter, is supposed to have a branch that's called the Community Advisory Board, or the CAB. That's where your voice as the community is supposed to be heard by the executive director and the management of KDHX. That arm, they eliminated that arm over 6 years ago. Therefore, as they were doing their turmoil and their damage, you, the community, had no voice and no choice. And it stays as it stands right now. If you are unhappy about what they're doing and you want to complain, you have no vehicle and no vessel to express yourself. They will not listen to you. So, how do we get your voices heard? And that's how, once again, our L.O.V.E came together. Some of us were still volunteers. Many weren't. But we knew what it takes and what it would take to make the wrong right. And because of what's wrong, what's wrong, we know that change, when you have change, this is a democracy. And you have to fight for change. Reggae music is my driving force, so I am there front and center. You have to fight for change. What do we do to change what's going on? You have to change what's happening right at the top. If you're going to make any changes that's been made in American history, I've learned to start right here on college campuses, where students say, no, we're not having none of that. We're not having it. And you're going to put up a resistance. And that's what we're doing, is putting up a resistance for change. So we know that in order for change to happen, you've got to change the top. We've had an executive board of directors, supposed to be 15 members strong. They've been functioning on 5 board members for the last 6 years. 6 empty seats, left void. Seats for us, the volunteers, totally ignored. Get out of the picture. So you've got 6 cronies running a ship that's supported and paid for by you, the community, your money.
I do have hope for the future because there was recently a settlement that placed Courtney and Kip on the board, and they are also joined by volunteer radio hosts Chi Whiz and Lady Jock. So I do believe that there is change, but what we're seeing is that democratically representative, I mean, they were not necessarily 1-for-1 voted in this case, except for Kip and Courtney, admittedly, and Darian. But aside from that, we have more representation on the board now than prior. And it will take time to see how that plays out, but the more representation of the people's will on boards such as that, such as, say the Supreme Court, the more equitable it can be, because can 15 people really understand the full scope of what's needed for St. Louis as such a dynamic city and so many pockets of communities that all look so diverse and different but are so intertwined by every brick laid in our town. And I even see this all the way up into current cases such as that against the L.O.V.E, where they're fighting for free speech. And if the precedent for their case goes on, I would be remiss to see if corrupt KDHX leadership staff were to use a false judgment of the L.O.V.E as precedent for it doesn't matter what you say. So I do hope that if you haven't ever heard of the L.O.V.E or their solidarity movement, to consider looking into recent court cases regarding that, which just happened this past week. And there is a fight for free speech right now, and public radio is one of those avenues of free speech that it's interesting to protect because it's so vital, and it's in this gray area right now. So I hope, I think being lukewarm is, this is not a time for lukewarm. This is a time to have an opinion. Be around people who are like-minded to you with intention, and learn from people who aren't like-minded with you, and understand where you can relate to your fellow man and have a civil discourse regarding what's possible about the future without making it, personal, of course, in a non-violent way. And I do believe that there is a way through for our democracy of non-violent revolution, through communication, through free speech, through banding together with intention, as opposed to being lukewarm in times like these. I think all art is valid and all art is political, whether we want to believe it or not, whether we really want to face that truth or not.
Thank you. And then I have a question that, as you were talking about like your podcast and also talking about what we can do and thinking about the future, like in the book publishing industry, something that has changed is that in the past, like maybe even just a decade ago, you had to work through publishers. You could not self-publish and be taken seriously. You couldn't get your name out there. But now writers can self-publish and they can create art and they can spread it because of the fact that, the world is so connected through the internet. So my question is like about podcasts and sharing music on podcasts. Like that's a viable option, but it seems like there's still something special about having a radio where it's for the community and there's people in the community that are playing different genres of music that they love. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief with that because I have a lot of feelings about that. Well, when it comes to having a music podcast, there is gatekeeping when it comes to sharing music online. It's having the rights, and that's what made the licenseship at the community radio level and college radio level is that it kind of is an unbridled licenseship. Like there is a license to be paid for from the station, but you're able to play pretty much anything that you want as long as it's clean for radio airplay, and you do on-air cite whose music it is. And so it's, one, you're getting out to more people just by them flipping on an FM receiver or them flipping to their favorite radio streaming app or KDHX.org to listen to that stream. The other thing too is we're in a phase, I hate to tell you how much I use Spotify, but I use Spotify a lot. And I like the user interface. I like curating on there because I know how to make my playlists and stuff, but I make my own playlists because the algorithm on Spotify homogenizes all of our tastes. So part of the advantage of having the community radio station show is to share curation with the listener that they wouldn't otherwise have been exposed to. And so that's fighting against the algorithm right there, I would say. How many of you use Spotify? How many of you listen to the radio? Not on Spotify, I'm talking FM receiver radio or online. I also want to give you a resource for anyone who uses streaming online that wants to listen to the radio and find something unique. Radio.garden. And you can get KDHX on there, you can get pretty much any radio station in the world on there. You can travel to Jamaica if you want to, on that online. So there's areas, pockets where things are not gatekept as much, and there's other areas where it's still working, it's like that's what was so special about having KDHX for me every Monday morning, was being able to be a source of music discovery for people taking their kids to school in the morning, or people like yourselves going to that class in the morning and starting the week off right. Yeah, starting on a fresh start, on something new, on something that was upbeat and relatively positive, or at least a little introspective. But when it comes to other avenues online right now, it's still to do the same thing online would be to be highly contextual, and even another level of getting the rights getting a verbal approval from local artists to play their music. So it's not, you're curating from a smaller set of colors in that case, a smaller set of threads. I would say that's would be the main obstacle. I don't think that's necessarily changing anytime soon, because I do think those artists should be represented and given their credits in the way that they've signed up with BMI and things like that. But, you know, if you do look at the history of the recording industry, it is very much gatekept, and it still has those draconian dreads within it. Although, you know, supporting your favorite small-time artists can be even easier nowadays with things such as Bandcamp Friday. It's first Friday of each month. And whenever you purchase from an artist page on Bandcamp Friday, Bandcamp doesn't take anything out of those sales on Bandcamp Friday. So that even nowadays, it can be very easy to support those artists that are there's not a record label to pay. What about you?
Well, online, I've had on English Pound Radio for 20 years streaming online. I know that it's allowed, as I said, artists from this area of this world to be exposed into other countries, because I think globally, I've been doing radio for so many years, and I've had to change with technologies. Do any one of you here know what a cart machine is? A C-A-R-T, cart machine. It's an old, probably 5x6 cartridge that you would insert into a machine in a radio station, and that would play the commercial. That was how I learned with music, producing music and commercials back in the day. It's no longer done that way now. Everything's done digitally. So I've had to adapt and change over the years with the music. And I see that the music now during my lifetime has changed into a digital one. So many people, you could do what I do. I went to school to get trained to be on the radio. It's not just a given thing. Anybody can be a TikTok DJ nowadays. But a DJ, to do it properly, it's an art form.
It's like investigative reporting a little bit. It's kind of like you kind of have to put sunglasses on and your little notebook and be like, so wait, where did you come from? And you have to find the pockets instead of letting it come to you, because if it's coming to you by way of an app, you got to it a little late, sorry.
But with the apps too, I mean, it allows you to get introduced into other areas, because like I said, in other countries, other parts of the world, you have to think global. It can no longer be just thinking about just where we live. So technology nowadays, yes, it enables us to do that. Couldn't have done this connected with the world before, 40 years ago. I'd have to make a copy of my show, record it on an old cassette machine, on a small TDK cartridge, drop that in the mail to the post office. That'll take about a week to get there, goes to the destination, they'll get it another week. Nowadays, we just do it in less than 20 seconds.
Is there any final things that you all want to say before I open it up to questions from the audience?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what we all have on.
Okay, I'm going to walk around so I have the microphone. If there's anyone who has questions for them, raise your hand, I'll bring it over.
So you guys spoke a lot about radio. And when you guys asked about who listens to radio versus Spotify, not very many people raise their hands about radio. So I guess my question is, because you guys have spoken a lot, gave us a lot of history about the former radio station that you worked at, what kind of guidance can you give 18 to 25-year-olds about art and democracy beyond radio?
So I think, like I had mentioned, access to art is something that is one of the most beautiful things about living in St. Louis, and it's something that you know, when it comes to access, we all have student IDs, right? Do we still have physical student IDs these days? Ideally, it doesn't have an expiration date on there. So hold on to that, because wherever you go in the world, if you show your student ID, you're gonna have access to even more art. When it comes to access to art, I do see art as like a resource for human vitality and something that can, you know, widen worldviews and widen the realm of what's possible for our collective and what's possible for our future systems as well. And so I think radical sort of accessibility is something that is almost the point of democracy as well, for all future systems. So that's kind of where my mind is at with it.
Mine is actually a little simpler than yours. Just one word that you're all familiar with. Google. If you're not sure, what do? You Google it, innit? If you're not sure, where do I find it out? You jump on Google. So you can enter any keyword you want, any described situation that you're looking for. Once again, you're an artist. 16, 18, 20 years old. What do I want to do? I want to be a fashion designer. What do I want to do? How am I going to get there? Google is a good research for that. You have to invest in yourself, invest in the time. I was interested in radio. That was my passion. So what did I do? I went to school for it. On the school that I attended, they had a radio station. I put my behind in there, I invested. If I really wanted it, because as a young boy, I first fell in love with radio at 7 years old. What's this little man doing inside the radio? How can his voice be coming out of here? It used to freak me out. I'd listen to radio stations and programs in Luxembourg. How did that happen? So that mystified me. So when I had the opportunity, it allowed me to learn. I went to school and I learned.
Yeah, let the art get you curious about like yourself, about the world, about like allowing art to inspire questioning. I think questioning why things are the way they are, and asking questions about what it could be, what it could look like to see the world around us improved, and then using art to be in touch with the representatives who are in office, who want to be in office. I think a lot about my mom's a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen, and he puts his songs where his heart is regarding politics a lot of times as well. And so I encourage you, if you have a message, get it out. If you love a message, share it, and don't be ashamed of what you believe in, because as long as you're not harming anyone and you're intentional, that is so beautiful for the future of mankind, of our species.
One thing I will add to answer your question, one thing I would fully encourage all of you to do, because I have children who are a little older than you, 4 that have graduated with, 2 of them with masters, and that was recently, less than 5 years ago. So I know what you're going through. So as a dad, I'd say to all of you, travel. One word, travel. It'll open up your mind to a whole different world when you're physically there on another country's soil. And if your desire is fashion, you know you're going to go to Paris. You should want to go to Paris. And when you're actually there, it's a different experience.
I encourage you to go as an ambassador for the art that as a fashion ambassador in this case, as opposed to skimming the surface as a tourist. Definitely dive in deep as much as you can. If you have a DM for that person that's in that town that you're going to, and you're inspired by them, see if they can make it to coffee with you while you're there. But yeah, even traveling as far as the train will take you here in town.
Not only that, when you go to certain venues, there are people there that are willing to share knowledge with you for free, just by talking. They know you're a foreigner. Everybody wants to talk to an American nowadays because they like your accent, just like how you guys like mine. traveling. Trust me, it works.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I think that's all for today. Thank you so much for being here and finishing up.
I just wanted to say, Lindsay, I've got a little booklet here which tells you more about the L.O.V.E of KDHX. You're all on Facebook. On Facebook, just type in and you have to spell out all the words. League of Volunteer Enthusiasts. It'll be on this little flyer right here. Take it. You can learn more about us and connect with us because we want to connect with you. We're all the community. We're part of democracy.
And I hope if you enjoy live music and good food, September 27th at the Royale, there will be a lot of former KDHX folk there, and you get to meet some of those personalities you heard on the radio in person. So I hope you can make it September 27th.
Thank you.